Good afternoon dear students, I am Rajesh and you are watching Learning SS with Rajesh YouTube channel. Dear students, in 10th class history Cbse we have started lesson number 2 and today is the last video to complete the lesson number 2, Nationalism in India. I hope you have completed the previous video, the learning of previous videos easily, and you have understood all the points of the lesson easily. So let's start our today's work by starting the limits of civil disobedience movement. In the previous video, you learned that how did people participate in civil disobedience movement. You learned that business classes and about business workers and number of people like peasant, rich peasants and poor peasants. You learned about that in the last video. So there were many limitations of civil disobedience movement. It can be the same question in your exam. Write about the limitations of civil disobedience movement, or what were the demands of Dalits and that Muslims during the civil disobedience movement. It can be the next type of question in exam, and it can be also the question like, why did Gandhiji not want to support separate electorate? These are the some example of questions we are going to read now. Now, you know that there were some limitations of civil disobedience movement. First was, Dalits were not supporting that Congress because they have some problem or there was some requirements. So now we will discuss about their problems or requirements. Dalits, now legally known as SC in Indian Constitution scheduled castes, Dalit were against Congress. Now the major question in your mind, why were they against Congress? Because Congress was supporting high class Hindus. They thought that Congress is supporting high class Hindus. It means general people. That's why they were annoyed with Congress. But Gandhiji supported them. It's the major question and will be 3 marks question. How did Gandhiji support Dalits during the civil disobedience movement? I hope you learned what type of question will be there. Now we will learn about that. How did Gandhiji support Dalits during the civil disobedience movement? But they were annoyed with Congress. He called them the untouchables, Harijan. He called them Harijan. You know that Harijan here means the son, or means the generation of God, the people of God. I hope you learned the point now. The next point is, he organized satyagraha to secure them entry into temples and access to public places. He also organized satyagraha for them, and the demands and the major problem you learned now. And he himself cleaned the toilets to dignify the work of the Bhangi. You know that a group of that society that involved in that such type of work, this community was known as Bhangi. And he also, it means Gandhiji himself cleaned the toilets to give the importance to that work of Bhangi. I hope you learned the next point also. How did Gandhiji support Dalits or the SC classes during the civil disobedience movement? And you also learned their problem, why were they annoyed with Congress. Now, another problem was also there. Dalits thought that these problems, their backwardness, and the next problem that Congress is not supporting them, can be solved with one solution, and the solution is separate electorates. So now the next question will be in your exam, why did untouchables or Dalits want separate electorates? Now you will learn that their leader was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. It will be objective type question in your exam. Who were the leader of untouchables or Dalit during the civil disobedience movement? And you will write that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar. He organized Dalits into the Depressed Class Association in 1930. It will be the another objective type question. Question will be who organized Dalit into Depressed Class Association, and you will write that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. And the next question, when were they organized as a Depressed Class Association, and you will write that in 1930. I hope you learned the first 2 points now. Next, the British government conceded his demand of separate electorates. You learned that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was demanding separate electorates for Dalits. The British government conceded his demand that there will be separate electorate for Dalits. But what was the problem here? Gandhiji began a fast unto death. He told that if a separate electorates will be given to Dalits, he will be on fast until death. Now the major point here. Why was Gandhiji on a fast unto death? Nextly, you will learn that what was the solution there, sir? Finally, what was the solution? Was Gandhiji died, or there was separate electorates for them? He thought that it would slow down the unity of Indians. Now, why was Gandhiji on fast? Because he thought that it would slow down the unity of Indians. Now, you learned that during the civil disobedience movement, what were the major problems of Dalit? And you also learned that why were Dalits demanding for separate electorates? You learned that their leader was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He was supporting them and demanding for separate electorates. And he organized them into a depressed class association. And government fulfilled his demand. But on the other hand, Gandhiji was against this demand. And why were they demanding for separate electorates? You learned that it would help them. But Gandhiji thought that it would slow down the unity of Indians. Now, Pune Pact. It is the major question of this lesson. What do you mean by Pune Pact? It was held in September 1932. It was a pact between Gandhiji and Ambedkar. Here you can write, it was a pact between Gandhiji and Ambedkar. So I wrote, it gave a separate electorates to Dalits, Pune Pact. But what was the pact between Gandhiji and Ambedkar in Pune Pact? Pune is in Maharashtra, you know. Ambedkar accepted Gandhiji's position. It means Gandhiji was on fast and Ambedkar accepted Gandhiji's position, or means opinion. So what was the solution there? Dalits later on, SC got reserved seat in provincial and central councils. During that Pune Pact, Dalits later on, they were known as SC, I told you in the beginning today, got reserved seats in provincial and central council according to Pune Pact. But what was the agreement between Ambedkar and Gandhiji? If they got separate, or means reserved seat, what was the pact between Ambedkar and Gandhiji? Ambedkar convinced that there will be reserved seat, but they will be elected by the voting of all people, including generals. I hope you learned the point now. Next is Muslim. Muslims were also demanding for separate electorates. Now it can be the another question, why were the political leaders demanding, and it's the exercise question by CBSE, NCRT. Why were the different political leaders demanding separate electorates? You learned that why were Dalits demanding, and now you will read about why were Dalit Muslims demanding for that. Their leader was Muhammad Ali Jinnah. He was demanding separate electorates for Muslims. Here Muslims, not Muslims. Here Muslims. Muslims. Because Muslims thought that Congress is supporting Hindus. Why were Muslims demanding for separate electorates? Because they thought that Congress is supporting Hindus. And they also thought that if they got separate electorates, their culture will be saved. Because they were in minority in India, and they thought that if they got reserved seats or separate electorates, their culture will be saved in India. That's why Muhammad Ali Jinnah and Muslims were demanding for electorates, separate electorates. Now you learned the major limitations of civil disobedience movement. Now you can write that during the civil disobedience movement, Indian communities were not united because Dalits were demanding their separate electorates and Muslims were also demanding separate electorates. And on the other hand, Gandhiji was opposing them. He was on the fast unto death. But there was a Pune Pact between Ambedkar and Gandhiji. You will also learn that, and I hope you learned now. Nextly, a sense of collective belonging by showing nation as an image is known as visualizing the nation. You learned in first lesson, nationalism in Europe. By showing a nation as an image. Now, what type of image was shown during the nationalism in India? A picture of Bharat Mata was prepared to visualizing the nation, Indian nation. And now the heading is a sense of collective belonging. A sense of collective belonging here means what were the major steps taken by the leaders of India or revolutionaries of India to collect all the people, to unite all the people for freedom fighting. For such type, solution was showing a nation as an image. And to show India as a nation as an image, a picture of Bharat Mata was prepared by Abanindranath Tagore. It was firstly prepared by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, but during the Swadeshi movement, it was painted and some glorified by Abanindranath Tagore. And in this image, Bharat Mata, she looked ascetic. Ascetic here means like saint. And nextly, she looked calm, divine and spiritual. Here is another question in your NCRT exercise. Compare the picture of Bharat Mata and Germania of Germany. Compare. And while comparing, you will write that in Bharat Mata, the picture prepared by Abanindranath Tagore and Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, Bharat Mata was looking like in an ascetic scene, and she was looking like a calm, divine and spiritual, and she was wearing the red dress and have a tricolor dress, you know. You can write that. But on the other hand, Germania was wearing only, she was representing Germany, while Bharat Mata is representing India. And Germania was wearing the that top of or head of thorn oak leaves, but no oak leaves were used by Bharat Mata. You know that Bharat Mata was looking like ascetic. On the other hand, Germania was not looking like that. I hope you learned the major difference between Germania and Bharat Mata now. And nextly, to visualizing the nation and or means to collect the nation as a revolutionary, Vande Matram written by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee for a sense of collective belonging. Vande Matram. You know that Vande Matram is India's national song and is taken from a novel written by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee named as Anand Math. Vande Matram is taken from Anand Math, and Vande Matram here means we the people of India saluting you Bharat Mata. Vande Matram. Its Vande Matram is sung in to devote themselves to Bharat Mata. I hope you learned the point now. What was the major step taken by different revolutionary for collecting the Indian belonging? Next point. Traditional culture. Traditional culture was also motivated or developed by the Indian revolutionary for a collective sense of belonging. Folk tales sung by the revolutionaries, and in Madras, Natesa Sastri published 4 volumes of Tamil folk tales. It will be the objective type question in your exam, that Natesa Sastri in what type of folks or in which language he prepared or he published a volume, and you will write that in Tamil folk tales. Natesa Sastri. I hope you learned the second point, that during the traditional culture, people or revolutionary focused on folk tales, and also folk tales published by Natesa Sastri. And the next point is tricolor flag, Tiranga. Tricolor flag is also prepared by Indian revolutionaries to increase nationalism in India. A flag also helped to grow nationalism. You know that flag also helped in growing nationalism, and nowadays you learned that during the Independence Day in this month, Har Ghar Tiranga, you learned the slogan by every Indian to strengthen Indian nationalism. And it was that time also. During Cbse movement, red, green, yellow flag was made. And you know that now no yellow color in Indian or no red color is not there. But during Cbse movement, these 3 colors were there in Indian tricolor. And nextly, then red, green and white flag also prepared during 1920s. And it was spinning wheel in the center of that flag. And you will write that the tricolor of India increased nationalism in India during the freedom struggle. And you will also write that what were the color in that during the freedom struggle. Nextly, a reinterpretation of history was also announced to grow nationalism in India. Great achievement discussed. Indian great achievement discussed by the people to grow nationalism. And art, science and maths development praised by all Indians, that Aryabhat discovered zero in India. It's a very good development for India and all over the world. And science and art also praised by all Indians during the freedom struggle. And nextly, legends also praised by the people of India or the singers of India, revolutionaries of India. They praised that this is the land of Bhagat Singh, Mahatma Gandhi, and the land of Rani Lakshmi Bai, Mangal Pandey and Shivaji. They praised the legends to motivate Indian people and to grow the nationalism. I hope you learned the all points of today's video. Now I am revising. In the last, we learnt about the limitation of civil disobedience movement today, that there were major limitation of civil disobedience movement, Dalits and Muslims were demanding for separate electorates. And you also learned that Mahatma Gandhi supported Dalits by saying them Harijan and by cleaning a toilet himself. And nextly, why were Dalits demanding for separate electorates? To strengthen themselves. Who was their leader? Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He formed an association, you also learned about that. And there was a conflict between Gandhiji and Ambedkar, you also learned that. And there was a pact also between them known as Pune Pact. And you also learned that why were Muslims demanding for separate electorates, and their leader was Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and why were they demanding that. And at last you learned that how did the collective belonging or nationalism grew through the culture of India, and to promote the culture, revolutionary or the poet and writer made or artist made a picture of Bharat Mata, and also written Vande Mataram. And next few points. I hope you enjoyed today's session, and if you are new on my YouTube channel, please subscribe the channel, like and share also. And the old one, I am requesting you to share the video more and more, that our family can be developed. Thank you and have a nice day ahead.